So it looks like Kim Kardashian has started her own true crime podcast. It's called The System, which of course is referring to the criminal justice system. Sounds kind of like the title of a YA dystopian novel. But anyways, the criminal justice system is messed up, yeah, but I don't know if I exactly need Kim Kardashian to explain that to me. I've listened to the few episodes that are currently out right now, and I do have thoughts, both about the structure of the podcast and about Kim's social justice era in general. First of all, I can't even just get over how Kim's head is taking up the entire cover image. And I completely understand putting yourself as the cover image because it's your podcast, but damn, it's huge. I also think one genuine critique of it is that it takes so much attention away from the text on the cover, and so much so that you can barely notice the title. But anyway, The System is a true crime podcast, both executive produced and hosted by Kim Kardashian. There's a bunch of other people who work on the podcast too. The credits at the end of the episode are pretty extensive. It seems like each season will focus on a different case, probably. The first 8 episodes will be about Kevin Keith, a man currently serving a life sentence for a triple homicide he was convicted of in 1994. So at the time that the podcast was recorded, he'd been in prison for 28 years. Keith was initially on death row, but Kim tells us his sentence was commuted to life without parole just 2 weeks before his scheduled execution. Keith claims he's innocent, and his conviction was a case of mistaken identity. To his credit, there was no weapon found and no other physical evidence connecting him to the scene. Kim tells us that the goal of the podcast is to bring all of the evidence in front of us and then let us judge for ourselves, but the objective of the podcast is clearly to clear Keith's name, and I don't think there's anything wrong with leading with that. Kim is aware that we're all going to be questioning as to why she's the right person to tell this story. Early on in the first episode, Kim mentions the case was pitched to her by one of the producers on Family Feud, and she does say pitched, like it's a concept for a TV show or simply just another topic for content. Apparently, people bring cases to her attention all the time, but she felt especially attached to this one. Kim then says that the Family Feud producer connected her to another TV producer and reform advocate named Lori. Lori apparently had a bunch of notebooks full of case information that she shared with Kim. And Kim said that after reading the notebook and seeing the other binders full of information, which Lori had apparently compiled over 6 years, that she was all in. The shady part of me feels like it's because it was obvious that most of the research and dot connecting had been done for Kim already. The structure of the podcast is interesting. It's not just Kim narrating a story from start to finish. She includes clips from interviews and news reports so that we can hear the voices of a lot of the people involved in the case. And I like podcasts that do this because it helps create the full atmosphere for the case, and it also keeps things from getting monotonous. The frustrating part about this, though, is that Kim will either say something and then play the clip of the person themselves saying it, or vice versa, as if we didn't just hear it for ourselves. It leaves you to wonder what exactly Kim is providing with her narration, since most of the heavy lifting is being done by the clips that are included in the podcast. Apparently, this is a criticism that quite a few listeners of the podcast had, so I wasn't alone in having this opinion. I think this is an example of the larger issue with the narration in the podcast. It spoon feeds the audience to a point that slows it down. Most of what Kim says in her narration is either repetition of something we've heard, is common knowledge, or she's just talking about herself. Several times in the podcast, Kim stops and defines words for us like clemency and pardons and alibi. Though maybe the average child might not know what those words mean, an adult does, especially the type of adult who's most likely listening to a true crime podcast. Though Kim's team has denied this, I do want to acknowledge that the family of the victims claim that they weren't contacted for the podcast. In an interview, one of the victims, Quentin Reeves, said neither Kardashian nor anyone working on the podcast contacted him during production. One of the other victims, named Quinita, said that they weren't contacted until the podcast premiered on October 3rd. A couple days ago, a statement released through TMZ said, "The production team of The System made multiple attempts to reach out to the Reeves siblings. At the time, they decided not to share their story and requested we no longer contact them. If they have reconsidered, we welcome them to sit down for the podcast at any time." Even though it's not technically illegal, I always find it kind of distasteful when people know the victims or family don't want to contribute to a video, movie, or podcast or whatever, but they decide to make it anyway. A lot of the podcast, especially the first episode, isn't even really about Kevin Keith and his case. Kim takes a detour halfway into the episode where she has to remind us that she freed Alice Marie Johnson in a way that gives off the vibe that she's reminding us of why she deserves to host The System. She talks about how she went to the Kushners and Trump personally to get Alice pardoned. And then she mentions she found Alice the ideal candidate essentially to launch her pursuit of freeing wrongful convicts. Kim says she chose to free Alice Johnson because she was the best person for it image-wise. Her reasoning for this was that she was a mother and grandmother, and the implication there is that she's a nice old lady who's harmless. I don't think someone's image should make them a more viable candidate, only whether there's sufficient evidence that they didn't commit the crime or any similar ones, and that they're a non-violent offender. And while I can somewhat see Kim's point, heavy on somewhat, what she says after that is even more questionable. Kim says it was important for her to choose the right person to free from jail in order to prove nothing bad would happen with them walking the streets. So this comment kind of just moves it beyond optics and seems to imply that because of a person's image alone, we can predict how they're going to behave once they get out of jail. I don't see how being a grandmother or a mother would make someone less likely to offend than someone who likewise has no prior criminal record or history of violent behavior. But this comment does prove that Kim is intentional about the cases that she chooses to take up and the image that they'll project. After freeing Alice, Kim has shifted the majority of her focus onto cases dealing with black men, especially ones on death row. Because of this, Kim can attempt to align herself as a leading voice regarding conversations about Black Lives Matter, police brutality, and things of the like, which she wouldn't necessarily get to do otherwise. Kim's podcast is the latest development in her drawn-out marketing campaign to make sure we all see how serious she is about becoming a lawyer. A few months ago, she spent an entire episode of the Kardashians focusing on commuting Julius Jones' death sentence. Though I'm not going to knock Kim for saving someone's life, there is something kind of dystopian about a mega celebrity showing the process on their reality show, where they also show themselves picking out outfits for Fashion Week and hosting baby showers and other lavish parties. A lot of that episode was also spent watching Kim leverage her celebrity connections in order to get Jones' sentence commuted before the deadline. Kim does that same sort of thing in her podcast as well. She spends time that she could be spending talking about Kevin, telling us that she has her own legal team, and that some of the lawyers she worked with helped her dad on the OJ case. We know that as one of the most famous people in the world, Kim probably has connections in nearly every industry. But it seems like Kim herself feels the need to consistently remind us that other people are taking her seriously, so we need to take her seriously as well. I feel like the big issue with Kim censoring herself in a lot of these efforts is that it points out that she benefits from a lot of the inequities that she now publicly wants to condemn. Kim by no means is the only person doing this sort of work, even in the cases that she puts her face on, but she's becoming one of the most known people for doing it. This is obviously because of Kim's large platform. At any given moment, Kim can get a message in front of millions of people. But I don't think that having a huge platform is always equivalent to getting a lot of people to care about the cause that you're promoting, especially to the point where they're ready to take action. You don't even have to follow Kim Kardashian to see her post on social media because she's everywhere. I don't even follow Kim on social media, but I see a lot of her selfies and paparazzi shots and things just because so many other accounts repost them. Yet I very rarely see any reposts of any content she makes regarding criminal justice reform or any cases she works on. Because let's be real, Kim Kardashian's general fan base doesn't care about criminal justice reform, and they're not following Kim for that sort of content. And more importantly, the demographic that Kim is trying to reach either likely doesn't follow her, or if they do, they're not listening to anything that she has to say about politics or criminal justice. I acknowledge that Kim is working towards becoming a lawyer and has gotten people out of jail and off of death row, but I'm also going to be real and say that Kim Kardashian is never going to be the leading voice of prison reform. People aren't going to forget that the community that Kim now wants to help is the same community she and her family have profited off of for decades. Also, the irony in Kim centering herself and her platform is that it in a way reinforces that someone with her wealth and proximity to whiteness is always going to be the voice that holds the most weight. Of course, Kim's platform has a lot to do with it, like I said, but still the Kardashians have built that platform and an empire off of behaviors that Black and brown women are vilified for. I'm not sure what part of that is reform, so much as perpetuating a cycle of who gets listened to and who gets to validate the importance of issues and who doesn't. Usually, Kim cites either her kids or her father as her personal reasons for seemingly suddenly wanting to get into law. From what I understand, her father was a lawyer for her entire life, so it seems like she would have realized that passion earlier. But I do remember in that episode about Julius Jones, Kim said that her dad told her never to become a lawyer because of how stressful it is. So maybe that's what made her want to become a stylist and socialite instead first. Kim claims that if she hadn't become a reality TV star, she'd always wanted to be a crime scene investigator or an attorney. I can also understand that as Kim gets older, she might want to pursue more adult interests, and she probably feels more in tune now with her dad than she did when she was a lot younger. I don't know, I feel like we become more in tune with our parents as we get older and as we become the same age that we've always known them to be. Kim has also been open about how practicing law makes her feel closer to her dad since she lost him when she was only 22. So if she feels like this helps her carry on her dad's legacy in a way, I can understand that. What I don't understand is whenever Kim uses her kids as reasoning for wanting social justice reform. Several times, Kim has said something along the lines of having black sons and being afraid of them being stopped by the police or afraid of them being profiled. But it would be almost unrealistic to say or feel like her kids, who are biracial and whose parents are both billionaires, are at as much risk as regular little black kids living in America. While I get that anything could happen, watching Kim act absolutely terrified about this doesn't sit right with me. And I think it's because she's shown multiple times that she kind of picks and chooses when she sees her kids as black. Perfect example, I saw a TikTok the other day criticizing Kim for not only partnering with Dolce & Gabbana, but for having her children attend the show and wear Dolce & Gabbana clothing.
I tweeted this earlier today, but I have finally hit the point where I have blocked the entire family, Kim, Kylie, Kendall, Courtney, Chloe. I've blocked everyone. Because the thing is, it doesn't matter if I block them, I still will be served content by them, the products they're pushing, the products they're selling, because they have a monopoly on the media. And the fact that they promote Dolce & Gabbana and partner with them with their chest, with their full chest, is so disgusting to me. And the fact that she's parading her black children around Dolce & Gabbana, like they're a part of the campaign or whatever, is absolutely insanity to me. And I am just so curious as to how these children will think and their opinions when they get older. But I'm just so done with this family, you guys. I'm so done of them being shoved down my throat.
I feel like this is because Kim is always going to see her children as wealthy Kardashian Wests before she sees them as anything else. But Kim and the Kardashians have proven time and again that everything they do is a business or for business. In the podcast, Kim has this weird moment where she says she thought what happened to Kevin only happens in movies and couldn't fathom it happening in real life. And then Kevin agrees with her. But he does go on to talk about the structural issues that lead a lot of young men to commit crimes, and it's so clear that Kim isn't equipped to add anything to this conversation. And for her to be doing the work that she is, I think it's important for her to understand not just what to do after the person's already been accused or convicted of a crime, but what puts these people in these situations to begin with, especially if she's so fearful of her children possibly being put in that position in the future. The Kardashians have regularly stolen ideas for their products from black creators and have used their proximity to blackness for social advantage. Currently, as we speak, Kim and her mother are being exposed for setting up Ray J to take the fall for allegedly leaking the tape that made Kim famous. I'm not a Ray J defender, nor am I a Kanye West defender, but you can't say that you want to stand for and help black men and simultaneously have made your career off throwing one under the bus and still refuse to admit it 2 decades later. Even beyond that, Kim herself doesn't have a clean record. In 2008, she and her sisters were sued by Brandy and her mom for charging $120,000 into Brandy's credit card. Back in 2004, Kim worked as Brandy's stylist, which is why she had access to her cards to begin with. However, Kim had only been authorized to make one purchase. Instead, she allegedly gave her sisters the card to use, and they made several purchases for stores they had at the time, Dash and Smooch. Kim, Chloe, Courtney, and Rob were all named in the suit. In the end, because Brandy begged her mom dropped the lawsuit. Apparently, the Kardashians still agreed to pay back the money, but they never did, and they eventually settled out of court in 2009. It seems like the Kardashians are always in some lawsuit or another, or engaging in tone-deaf behavior that's contradictory to Kim's new social justice persona. It's never a bad thing to get someone out of jail who was wrongfully convicted or save them from death row, but it's so clearly self-serving also. We can see it in the way that Kim centers herself in a lot of these conversations, and is seemingly not only getting into law as a passion, but as a way to rehab her public image also. I think one could fairly argue that despite the benefits of her using her platform, it's still exploitative behavior, but just in a different way. But I think the biggest question is how much it really matters, as long as the result that's achieved is an innocent person's life is saved or that they're out of jail. I don't think it's all that fair to attack Kim for making a career change or for having businesses outside of law. Yet it is fair to attack her by pointing out that a lot of her businesses don't treat their employees with the dignity she's fighting for others to be treated with. It's also fair to point out that in her past she's committed crimes that she still hasn't answered for, and how she's able to move through the world has a lot to do with that. So I'm not saying that people can be multifaceted or that Kim can't be a celebrity and an activist, but I am saying that her actions and her words should match. It might be easy to think, oh, well, at least Kim's helping while Kanye's not. But what one of them does has nothing to do with the other, and it's not like Kim and Kanye are on the opposite sides of a political or social justice binary. They've both proven several times that they're on their own side and are going to support and defend whatever makes them money and pushes whatever narrative they're selling at the moment. Regardless, Kim Kardashian's new place in the worlds of law, criminal justice, and true crime is one that's hard to explain and have a definitive opinion on. On one hand, Kim is using her platform to achieve real results, but it's also hard to look away from how Kim herself refuses to acknowledge that she, in fact, is a beneficiary of the very system she's claiming that she wants to reform. I probably will be listening to the rest of the podcast just to see how it unfolds. I don't know if I'll check back in with any critiques because I don't know if I have anything else to say about the situation. I guess if I do, you guys will be the first to know. But let me know what you guys think. Have you listened to the system? What do you think about Kim having this true crime podcast? Do you think she's just jumping on the podcast bandwagon? Do you think, like I said, this is just another block in her trying to build this narrative that she's going to be the lawyer and that she's now a woman of the people? What do you think? As always, be sure to comment, like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys again very soon. Bye-bye.